comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Hello, I'm Neil Oliver, and over the last 6 months, I've been fortunate to meet some fantastic people from all across the British Isles. Today, I'm looking back at some of my own personal favourites. Now, if, like me, you're old enough to remember the day in 1982 when the wreck of the Tudor warship Mary Rose was raised to the surface of the Solent after more than 400 years on the seabed, then I'm sure those images have remained with you ever since. Reputedly the favourite of King Henry VIII, who commissioned her and saw her go into battle for him across 3 decades, the loss of the Mary Rose was a tragedy of note. Hundreds of men were lost as she took part in the Battle of the Solent, fighting a French navy bigger than the Spanish Armada in 1545. The part of the wreck that was raised and conserved has been on display in Portsmouth Historic Dockyard ever since, a truly haunting and unforgettable artefact. And now, a new visitor experience allows the likes of us to get closer than ever before to sensing the reality of life aboard a Tudor warship. I was thrilled back in July to be joined by Alex Hildred and Dominic Jones from the Mary Rose exhibition, who brought with them multiple priceless items.
It's the everyday objects that you don't get elsewhere. You know, you just don't.
Do you know, people, you know, I've done my time as an archaeologist, and people say, you know, have you found gold, have you found this, have you found that? You say, well, little bits and pieces. But to me, it's these items that you can identify with that speak of people. You know, objects contain absent lives, and there's magic about these simple things.
Well, this comb was on the upper deck, and in that area we had the remains of 21 of the 92 individuals have been partially reconstructed. So, you know, that it is really, really personal, and sometimes you get chests which have then inside them got pouches which have got belongings within that, and it really is. You can't, it's like touching the past, you know. And I think it's the miracle of preservation, and that's what you get at the museum, and the start for this now will be this new start, 1545, will be
Dominic, you
great.
touched on your kids recognising the knit comb for what it is. What kind of reaction do you see day in and day out as people are suddenly in the presence of the Mary Rose?
I mean, it's the most amazing reaction. I think when you see people come through, it's all sorts of emotions. You get people, some people are emotional, some people just are amazed. And it's that moment when you come round the corner and then you see her, and it's just phenomenal. And what we're trying to do with this new exhibition is we're trying to just tell that story, because so many people think she sank on a maiden voyage or don't really sort of know about her. So by setting it up with the new exhibition, you can walk through as if you're on the decks on that day and sort of take part in her being sunk in the Battle of the Solent.
Well, we're seeing some pictures now. So this is the experience for
so you're part of it. So you're walking down there and you'll be there and you'll feel like you're
Oh, and she's going over.
Yeah.
And you'll hear the sound.
You hear the sounds.
Fired.
Oh, look at that.
And then you'll walk and you're into the Cowdray Gallery, and then, like you said, you have that moment where you come face to face with the ship.
What is the consensus then? You know, I've read various bits and pieces over the years about her sinking. What is understood now about why she came to end up where she did?
Well, it doesn't look as though she was over-gunned. By looking at the amount of guns and the spaces they were in, etc., and working out the weights and the ship, it doesn't look as though it's that. Undoubtedly, the gun ports on the main deck, the lids were open, and some of the guns were fired, some of them weren't. So there's one really good account that says she fired the guns on one side of the ship and was turning to fire to bring the guns on the other side to bear, and she sank on the side of the guns that had just been fired. And that is somebody reporting to the Holy Roman Emperor, and it's over a 2-week period where he's in England to try and basically make peace. And so that seems to be the most sensible thing, but there's a gust of wind is one of the other ones, mutiny amongst the crew, or not
French.
understanding the crew
French.
because there might have been some extra Spanish crew that had been picked up from a vessel that had gone ashore in Falmouth in February, and the people from there were amassed into Henry VIII's navy. So all sorts of different ones, but the most sensible one is that it's possible, we know that she was within range of the French guns from the galleys that were firing at her and that she was exchanging fire with. So that's still a possibility, and the fact that the front of the ship has broken, part of it has broken off, there are all sorts of questions about that. There's a letter that's been found in 2007, recently, in Hatfield House Archive, that is a letter from 2 shipwrights to Henry VIII saying, we cannot put guns in the very front, big bronze guns in the front of this ship, because if we do, we will mess with the structure, and that will be a great weakening of the ship near the foremast, and that's where she's gone.
So she may have been undone by new technology to some extent.
She may have been undone by the King's own message, but there's so many different potentials.
Now, these are shoes of some sort. I can't
That's
keep my
a
eyes
shoe.
off it. I suddenly noticed them again.
So that is one of about 380 shoes, 70 pairs, and there's 13 different styles.
Tudor shoe, though, it's amazing.
And they tell so much. You've got some which are Saxon-style turn shoe, and then these others which are welted and more modern and were early 16th century, and then ankle boots and 10 pairs of Puss in Boots, high thigh boots. But
you're talking, hundreds of these items. Is there anything comparable?
No, not really. Not for domestic every life. But it's not just. It's certainly for the Tudor period, and it's not just the domestic items. It's also the only dated longbows, for that period. And we've got, of the 250 that are listed for the ship, we've got over 138. 6,000 arrow fragments, 2,000 complete arrows. It's just the sheer numbers.
That's just ridiculous.
But for the everyday thing, it is like going back to Tudor life. You don't see these things in paintings because most of them are courtly paintings. You can see them in some engravings, and in fact the Cowdray engraving, which we use very much for this new experience, it provides a background because you're moving through the fleet as it's anchored just off Portsmouth Harbour. The French are off the Isle of Wight, and you're heading out towards the French galleys, and then the firing happens and the ship turns. So we use that engraving, and that's quite good for stuff, and we can look at that and find parallels within our collection. But the important thing is each one of these can be used, as you know, to be a cornerstone for dating. So our basket-hilted sword now is earlier than a lot of your Scottish basket-hilted swords.
Is
now.
It really?
Yeah. So it becomes a coat hanger, as you know, to date other objects. And there's so many within the Mary Rose that we've got that are like that.
What we have that's on display of the Mary Rose is a part, isn't it? Is there more of her on the bed of the Solent?
It's still on the Solent. We were talking about that the other day, about what we do about it. So yeah.
So we go and visit the site quite regularly, and after the ship came up in '82, we were basically cleaning up around the outside, seeing what was there, and looking for the bow, because those of you who've been to see her will realise that the bow is missing, and so it was always a search for the bow. Some of it was, a bit was cut off purposely in order to do the engineering to lift the ship, but the rest was left and then brought up. But what we were looking for when we went back specifically in 2003, because the Navy were going to widen the channel for their big CVF carriers to bring them to Portsmouth, and the area included part of the protected wreck area of the Mary Rose. So we had funding based on that, part of the mitigation strategy, to go back to the site. And so we did things like 5% sample of the spoil mounds, because we had spoil from the airlifts that took the unwanted debris away. And we found 400 objects, 9 of which were really good Tudor objects. 130 were Tudor, but 9 another gold coin.
Hundreds of...
Well, potentially, but it's difficult. It's an unknown. You know, to fundraise for that would be really difficult. And we've got a difficulty with COVID, like everybody else, of a lack of funds. So to actually consider going back to the site now would be impossible. But what we did find was the stem timber. It defines the whole shape of the bow, and we lifted that up along with another anchor. And associated with that was part of the port side, the missing side, the side that we thought had completely eroded away, forward of the break. So we've got part of the bow structure, but it's of the wrong side. So we can't pick it up and easily put it in the museum, because the museum isn't big.
But there's an unknown amount of the Mary Rose still.
And the exciting, yes, there is. But the exciting thing is we regularly go with Southampton Oceanography to look at, and more laterally with the Navy, to trial their equipment on looking at it, looking through the sediments and seeing what's there. And you can never pick it up. Never, because it's just the wood is the same as the silt.
Yes.
So you can't bounce off anything because you haven't got anything to bounce off. So the fact that we've got something that we know is there because we've seen it means that potentially all along that wreck site there might be other stuff. So it also means, you know, potential for the bow castle of the starboard side. So
tantalising.
It is, but you know, it's so difficult to.
Dominic, tell me, there is a very famous voice that's associated with the new visitor experience, is there not?
There is. We're so lucky. So when sort of looking for a voice that can tell the Mary Rose story, we were looking for another sort of national icon like the Mary Rose, and we were very fortunate to get Dame Judi Dench. And so when you come in to see 1545, which opens on the 26th of July, you get to hear Dame Judy's voice, you get to experience it, and then you go and meet the King, King Henry VIII, and then you go on the ship, and you're there in Tudor England on the night before, on the day she sinks. So, but yeah, Dame Judy's fantastic. We'll have to get your voice next, right?
Well, I'm available.
Come visit us.
I can't help noticing as we're having this conversation, I do it, you do it, it's almost irresistible to refer to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, people say, why do they call ships she? But there's just something about, despite the fact this one's called Mary Rose, but there is always that sense of a personality about these vessels, isn't there?
Yeah, and she certainly has one.
But we can't really ignore the rest of these pieces. What else have you got there?
So that's a whetstone holder.
Oh, for sharpening. For
sharpening. And it's made of poplar. But what the beautiful thing is, I don't know if you can pick it up on the camera, is the incised carving on the back. So a very functional thing, but beautifully carved. And, you know, that again shows that it's personal, because the things that were ship's issue, like this, are very, very similar, and some of them have H brands and various other things.
A little bit. Yeah, just so that... Yeah, we're going to try and catch a better...
So which
there we go.
Yeah.
There we go. That's lovely.
Good. I can see that.
That's lovely. Would you imagine that was done by a craftsman, or has that been done by the owner of the piece?
It looks pretty much as though it would be done by the owner of the piece. It's not, and there are so many different things that you'd think if it was a craftsman you were buying them in bulk, they would be the same. So the combs, for example, we've got a number of different styles, but most of them are the double-sided. But those have a similarity, and they were imported in huge amounts, you know, like 11,000 a year and various things like that from the continent.
It's a lot of knits.
But it's a lot of knits. But, you know, this is probably done by the owner, as a lot of other things. And the difference between this and a naval vessel of say, 50 or 60 years later is a lot of the stuff on board, a lot more would be naval issue rather than personal. And it then becomes streamlined and not as decorated. Right. So this is another one of the great things. It's a time, the exact time framework where you're changing from, it's the beginning of the Navy, it's people's personal things rather than naval issue. It's the same with the guns. Everything's almost bespoke, and a lot of it you think is for the first time, like we don't know how the gun port lids were opened or closed, because you haven't got a rope going through the inside as you do 50 years later. So there are all of these things that make it very, very special, as well as being Henry VIII's sword.
And the final.
Well, you should know about this sort of thing. You can take a guess.
Oh, it's a hilt.
From a ballock knife, yeah. So this would be worn for, daily as part of somebody's clothing, but you'd also use it for eating. The blade, though, would have come down to about there, so about 17 inches. And again, we have 65, so just our collection of that.
And you can almost sense the hand that held it. That's the thing.
It's small, and our sword, actually, I can hold. We've got copies of the sword, and it fits my hand. But yeah, and these are absolutely beautiful, and again, different styles and different types, and the largest dated single collection in the world. It's shown. Can you see it?
It's the way, but I think it's because these are modest pieces, and they're from people's everyday use. That in a way that lavish jewellery, I don't think really ever does. They summon the dead, don't they?
They do.
These items bring back the people who used them, because you can't help but identify with how they would be held and used, and just a wonder.
And during the excavation, obviously, you feel you're touching something for the first time. And things so small, like there was a cabin that the carpenters, we didn't know at the time, but when we came across it, obviously a partition that was slightly open, in a runner at the top and runner at the bottom, and in it was a little wedge. It is magic. It's those everyday things that you take for granted, and it just takes you back. And then the museum does that as well. And now with this new front to the museum, this journey through the thinking, it's going to make the entire thing even more personal, I think.
Wondrous. I think Mary Rose is just a gift. After the break, I'll be remembering when part of a World War II bomb was brought into the studio, and also dogs in wheelchairs. See you shortly.
We store, pick, pack and post on behalf of e-commerce sellers. So the guys that you buy from online, particularly in the last couple of years, people have been stuck at home buying from people online. We actually ship that stuff out.
So if you make stuff in your garden shed and sell it online, Hubu can take care of all the logistics, all the packaging, all the difficult stuff that really stops businesses from growing.
We can. We're unique in doing it for a much broader range of clients. They've always been fulfillment companies, which is what a company like ours is called. But they've tended to work with big clients, clients that have relatively few items and that ship them in huge volumes. We work with clients of all sizes, complex clients, clients that sell second-hand or vintage, small clients, people that do sell from their bedroom, so a really broad range.
Tell us about the physical side of the business.
It looks unlike a traditional warehouse, so we really revolutionised the way the warehouse floor works. There are some fundamental problems with warehousing, the biggest one being that it makes people miserable. It has them walking miles and miles every day. The micro warehouse collapses the business into a smaller warehouse that is run by a single individual. So that might be a picker or a packer. For us, they manage the whole thing, more like a retail unit, all of the inbound, all of the outbound, the picking, the packing, the posting. And crucially, they engage with the client as well. So they get that feedback loop that lets them know they're doing a wonderful job or helps them if they're not.
How about your East End background? Does that help?
It's made me tenacious and hardworking, but it's also made me very concerned that the people that work for us should be treated properly and paid properly. We work really hard.
Because you know what it's like at the sharp end.
Yeah, exactly. It's just got sharper and sharper over the last 10 or 15 years. Those kinds of jobs, the wages haven't increased. Meanwhile, the cost of rent these days is ridiculous. It's really difficult for people to make ends meet that are doing those kinds of jobs.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Back in October, Colin and Sean Welch from Research Resource Archaeology joined me to discuss World War II bombs. They'd recently uncovered the remnants of a German V2 terror rocket, 77 years after it detonated in a Kent field at a speed of as much as 3,300 miles per hour.
In terms of impact, what we've been finding is that when the V2 rocket actually hits the ground, the detonation train is not supersonic. So it actually punctures the ground if it's in a field. It's terrible if it hits a building, say, for example, the Target in London. But it goes into the ground, the pressure wave and the detonation. In the case of chalk, the chalk returns to the natural state it is at great depth, about 2,700 psi. It becomes liquefied.
By the impact?
By the impact. So in front of the missile, there's a great big pressure wave. It's truly astonishing.
So as this, but many metres long, is actually penetrating the rock of the chalk rock of Britain, it's liquefying what's in front of it.
Yes, and when the intelligence services were examining the sites to get as much information out of them, sometimes they'd make a note that they imagined that what had happened had been just the missile had been blasted to smithereens. Well, part of what we wanted to discover is what had happened to the 4 tons of missile that had landed in the ground. We couldn't understand that it just vaporised.
So that was the nature of the explosion meant that there was just literally a handful of
it disappears. For example, if you've got a crater. Here's the crater at one of the sites. The disposition of the fines is basically forming a crater below the crater. So the door's closed behind it because the chalk, in this case, is like blancmange or toothpaste. It disappears.
So it's almost like it's splashed into water.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, the speed, it was travelling at 1.1 kilometres per second on impact. So if you were stood in a field and one was coming towards you, you would not see it, you would not hear it. It would just appear, a huge explosion.
The impact, I mean that literally and metaphorically, on the British population of this kind of thing is hard to imagine, isn't it? I mean, this was like being attacked by the future.
Exactly right. The interface between an older way of thinking and a new way of thinking. This was the beginning of the space age. That is fundamental to a lot of thought. The Germans were spending enormous, colossal amounts on this technology, £12,500 relative to the V1 that we've also studied, excavated tens of flying bombs, to discover that the flying bomb was far more damaging to us as a weapon, but cost only £126. Yeah, quite a difference.
How did this come about for you two? How did you get into the business of hunting for and finding?
I think it all started fairly close to where near Colin lives. There was a V1 that came down in a wood. and we went exploring, and we found bits and pieces. We started doing research. The more we researched, the more we found that we didn't know the facts and the figures. And over the last 10 years, we've amassed thousands of pages of archives. And we've even gone to the extent where we've mapped every single V1 that came down in the country and every single V2. And to the extent that we can turn that into a time-based image on a map where you can see the V1s coming down and the start of the V2 campaign.
And what will be the product of all of that painstaking effort?
It's an analysis of how true the thinking was at the time about, for example, shifting the mean point of impact. At the moment, I think we were right in saying, we can't really see that it shifted very much at all, if at all. I mean, you must know the story of the two double agents who are sending information back to Germany, telling us that the impacts were in a certain place. Well, you tell the story, Sean.
OK. Military intelligence have documented that they had turned two agents who were in the UK to report back on the impacts, and they went down the route of them falsely reporting where the impacts were. But we can find no evidence that actually happened. It's a story that's repeated at military academies, and by plotting in a time-based sequence, we can actually see where the impacts are, and we can find no evidence that the mean point of impact was shifted. All I can say is that the V2 was very, very inaccurate.
Inaccurate?
Inaccurate. The mean point of impact was actually 10 kilometres to the north and east from the centre of London, and the spread of shot was over a colossal area. So if you consider that perhaps the ideal spread of shot would be inside the M25 corridor, well, it was actually 3 times that. So that's why we've got V2s impacting in fields in Kent.
So this V2 was just something that had gone woefully astray from where it was supposed to be?
Well, fired from The Hague, which is a low-lying launch platform, you know, urban area, prone to fog. At night, they were using very fine optical equipment and using torches to line up and set this thing up. It's not going to work. So we've got enough evidence to start putting things together. What you're seeing, Neil, is the sum total of not just the two of us, but an ever-growing team. We've got sponsorship, thankfully, from 2 wonderful companies for this excavation. HE Services, an international digger hire company who, I'm just astonished, but the Royal Engineers training team, Pearson TQ, provided personnel, a digger driver to help us out. We're just completely knocked out by the interest, by how much people want to help, and when we're digging, how many people turn up to see what we're doing.
It must be some scale of excavation when you're talking about the depth that these rockets were penetrating to.
Massive.
In this particular excavation,
looking at pictures here,
our driver estimated that he shifted 2,500 tonnes of material
to get down to where the projectile had ended up.
Yes.
We found evidence from 1.9 metres down to 6 metres in a particular place. This particular V2 rocket we thought would be in a certain place. Because we've studied lots of them, we thought that the missile was going to be at the end of the trajectory, but it wasn't. We dug a massive hole, found nothing. The reason for it was there was a bedrock of ragstone running across the site. The missile hit one side of it.
Look at the scale of the operation. We can't really tell the story without mentioning, you know, what happens then with who designed these and what becomes of him, because that's another story as well.
It is, and perhaps it's a story that a lot of people know. Werner von Braun was one of the scientists that were instrumental in designing the rocket, but along the way there were rocket engine experts and various experts in telemetry and the controls needed to guide the missile, because once it was launched, it was totally autonomous. There was a control compartment with a series of gyroscopes in.
But von Braun was headhunted, was he not, at the end of the war?
Well, that's right. All of the Allies were quite interested in the technology. America managed to get to Mittelwerk, Nordhausen first. And they removed complete examples of rockets. They then had to vacate the area because that formed part of the Russian zone. The Russians then went in and they were left with jigs, dies, tools and a pile of spare parts. They rounded up all of the technicians they could find, took that back to Russia to start their space programme. And as far as the UK was concerned, we had 6 examples of the rocket and we managed to do 2 or 3 live firings from Germany.
But the space race, the space programme for the Soviets and for the US would not have happened had it not been for capturing von Braun,
correct,
his team.
Absolutely right, yes.
And there wouldn't have been Neil Armstrong on the moon without
Absolutely right. Yeah. Werner von Braun, that was his basic target, to leave planet Earth, get some equipment to take us away from planet Earth. In fact, very soon, very near to the first launches in anger, he was arrested because the Germans believed that he was talking down the war and he was just interested in designing, a quotation, interplanetary spaceship.
Wow. So all of those, so the Elon Musks and the Bezoses and the Richard Bransons that are trying to leave Earth now, they have their ancestors in the man behind the V2 rocket.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Colin, Sean. Thank you for bringing that in. Thank you for manhandling what looks like about half a tonne of very precious metal. I cannot tell you how impressed I am to have finally been in the presence of the physical evidence of a V2 rocket.
Dogs, as any owner will undoubtedly tell you, bring boundless joy to the lives of those who welcome them into their families. They certainly do mine. And yet countless dogs come to harm from illness, from road accidents, or at the hands of humans, only to then find themselves left behind when it comes to being rehomed. The charity Broken Biscuits is helping those dogs. From what started as a series of random acts of kindness to then becoming a charity by providing custom-made wheelchairs, rehabilitation funding and help with rehoming. It's a tale not to be missed.
I just feel so passionate about them because it's heartwarming just to see how happy they are. And, you know, they deserve that chance. They deserve the right to life.
Am I right in thinking not happy about all attention not being focused there?
Yes.
Yeah. Are Broken Biscuits, the charity, are they providing homes for dogs like this that are needing homes? I mean, can people get in touch with the charity if they have the facilities and the wherewithal, whatever's required to look after dogs like this?
Yeah, we do. I mean, there are dogs that are, you know, stray dogs that have been rescued that, like these two with the lifers. There are dogs that families try to keep them, but, you know, sometimes it's just too much for them. So we do have surrenders, unfortunately. But we do try
By surrenders, you mean dogs that come back?
The families just decide they can't do it. You know, it's not for everyone. Oh, little man.
There's no absence of character there, is there?
Oh.
How and to what extent were you affected by, like everyone else, by the lockdown? Did that create unique problems?
It made me not want to go back to work at all because I just love staying at home with my dogs all day long. As far as these, no, they just love the extra attention, especially this little one. He's very, very just full of life. He's got such a personality, and that's part of the, you know, I know actually quite a lot of disabled dogs now, and they all just, you know, they love things.
I think we've also got some pictures of these and others of your charges enjoying the open air.
Oh yeah.
It's what kind of reaction do you get? I must admit that if I, you know, were I to encounter a dog in a wheelchair like this, it's quite confronting. What do people say to you?
I would say the majority of the.
Look at that, off-road.
Oh yeah. But this is it. They're very, very capable, and this is what people need to understand, and what we're trying to do is educate people because they are pain-free, otherwise it wouldn't be fair, and of course we wouldn't put them through it if it wasn't right. But we need to show that people, they are happy, they are capable, as you can see.
Absolutely.
They yes, you are. They love it.
Yes.
They love running around and chasing balls and doing just generally what dogs do. There's nothing stops them.
No, it's a revelation to me. I would just have thought for a dog to suffer this kind of injury, that would be not to put too fine a point on.
Yeah, of course.
Game over.
And I think it would have been years ago. I think that now things are becoming a little bit more... People are a bit more understanding, perhaps. And I think we are in an age of, you know, diversity and, you know... We're trying to raise awareness of disabilities of all sorts. It's not just disabled dogs, it's cats and any animals and people, you know, because the legs don't work, but the brain works exactly the same way and they're entitled to live the best life.
And as I say, I mean, I've got 2 Irish wolfhounds at home. The extent to which you become... They are like... They're not the same as children, of course they're not, but the intensity of the connection that's established with your dogs, and so for people to see that, you know, if almost the worst were to happen,
I think
there's still that possibility of because
I mean,
the last, you know, the absolute unthinkable is that you be without your dog.
Oh, you are noisy tonight.
And to see the way that these two demonstrate the possibility of life going on, not just for people but for dogs. It's great.
Exactly. It's a positive thing. You can. I know it starts off a negative, but there is a positive outcome if we could just educate people, and we need to educate some vets as well, because not all vets are on board. I don't know why that is, but that's something that at Broken Biscuits we're trying to make work.
Who invented these?
These are actually
they're more like chariots, I would say.
Well, yeah. I mean, we call them bikes, we call them wheels, we call them wheelchairs. These are actually from Walking Wheels, which is an American company.
Right.
There are a few other brands
as well. You can go shopping for these. Right. You don't have to have them made.
No. There's varying sizes. They start at a mini, which is a smaller one than this, which in theory Trooper should have, but he's a little bit. They wouldn't be robust enough for him because he's a bit hardcore.
Is he a bit vigorous?
Yes, he's a bit hardcore. And of course, we don't stick to just flat tarmac. We do normal walks through the woods, and they just bounce over those tree roots. Nothing bothers them. So they go from tiny to a large dog. They do them to fit your dogs if necessary.
Do dogs, who are able-bodied, how do they relate? Do you have other dogs in your life that
Well, I've got 5 rescue dogs.
Right.
And they've all got issues. I have got one with 3 legs at home, and they've all got certain things. But I find that they're very accepting of one another. It's as if they kind of sense it or they know. And when we're out on the field, lots of dogs come up to them and sniff them and go, "Woo!" I don't know what that is. You know, that's a bit freaky. But lots of dogs love them, and they chase and play with other people's dogs quite happily. Don't you? But they do run over people's feet
the way Trooper demonstrates that there is no loss of energy, character, personality. It's all still there, very much so.
You can just see by his face, you know, he's so full of life and so happy. Pippa's a little bit quiet because she's a little bit overwhelmed, I think.
Yeah. No, they're doing incredibly well in here.
They're amazing, and I just absolutely love it. It was the best thing for me. It's given me a purpose in life. My children moved out, and it just gave me something to focus on and to do some good.
I love it. I love dogs. I love to see the most being made of dogs and the best care possible being taken of dogs, and you are absolutely an exemplar of that.
Thank you so much.
I cannot thank you enough for having brought in these 2 spectacularly fascinating little characters.
Oh, they're
come again anytime. You're an ideal guest.
We've loved it. It's been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Here's to another 12 months of fascinating history, inspiring stories and wonderful guests. I wish you all the very best for the festive season, and I'll see you again in 2022.